Long before the first Tyrannosaurus rex let out its legendary roar, the Earth belonged to a different kind of monster. We often think of the dinosaurs as the beginning of everything, the original rulers of the wild. But there is a lost chapter in our planet's history, a time millions of years before the first terrible lizard ever hatched. This was the Permian period, a brutal, sun-scorched era where the rules of life were being written for the very first time. If you could step back 260 million years, you wouldn't recognize the world. There were no flowers, no grass, and no birds singing in the trees. Instead, there was a single giant landmass called a Pangea, an endless stretch of red dust, massive ferns, and swampy forests that felt more like an alien planet than our home. And in this harsh landscape, a terrifying creature reigned supreme. It wasn't a dinosaur, and it wasn't quite a mammal. It was something in between. This was the age of the Gorgonopsid. To understand the Gorgonopsid, you have to forget everything you know about reptiles. These weren't cold, slow-moving lizards waiting in the sun. They were synapsids, a lineage of animals that would eventually lead to us. They were the mammal-like reptiles. Imagine a creature the size of a grizzly bear with the sleek, muscular body of a lion. Its head was a heavy, bony box, built for pure power. But the most terrifying features sat right at the front of its mouth. Two massive, 4-inch long saber teeth hung down from its upper jaw, designed to pierce through the thickest hide. When a Gorgonopsid walked, the ground didn't just shake, it felt the weight of a professional killer. They didn't sprawl like a crocodile. Their legs were tucked more directly under their bodies, allowing them to chase down prey with terrifying speed. The air back then was different, thick with the smell of damp earth and rotting vegetation. In the heart of Pangea, the heat was relentless. Most of the continent was a vast inland desert where survival was a daily gamble. In this world, the Gorgonopsid was the undisputed king of the ghosts. Its primary prey was the Scutosaurus, a bizarre tank-like creature covered in bony armor and bumps. Watching a hunt in the Permian was a slow-motion nightmare. The Scutosaurus was slow, heavy, and dumb, relying on its thick skin to protect it. But the Gorgonopsid was patient. It would use those saber teeth like surgical tools, striking at the soft throat or the underbelly, waiting for the massive beast to bleed out in the dust. It was a world of raw, primitive violence, where the hunt could last for hours under a sun that never seemed to set. But life wasn't just about the giants. While the Gorgonopsids held the throne, other strange relatives were carving out a living in the shadows. There was the Lytrosaurus, a pig-sized creature with a beak and tusks that spent its days digging for roots. It looked harmless, almost comical, but it was one of the most successful animals to ever live. These synapsids were experimenting with features we now take for granted. Some were beginning to grow whiskers. Some might have had patches of fur to protect them from the brutal temperature swings between the boiling days and the freezing nights. They were developing different types of teeth, incisors, canines, and molars, allowing them to eat a variety of foods. This was the great laboratory of evolution, where the blueprint for the human body was being drafted in the dirt, in the blood of the Permian. As the millions of years ticked by, the world began to change. The climate of Pangea became a pressure cooker. The center of the continent was so far from the ocean that rain almost never reached it. Plants began to die off, and the great herbivores struggled to find enough to eat. Yet the Gorgonopsids adapted. They became leaner, faster, and more desperate. You can almost feel the tension in the air during those final years of the Permian. The Earth was becoming unstable. Deep beneath the surface, in a region we now call Siberia, The ground was literally starting to melt. This wasn't just a volcanic eruption, it was a planetary catastrophe. Huge cracks opened in the Earth's crust, spilling out rivers of lava that covered millions of square miles. This event, known as the Siberian Traps, didn't just last for a few weeks. It went on for hundreds of thousands of years. The atmosphere filled with carbon dioxide and toxic sulfur. The oceans began to turn acidic, and the oxygen levels plummeted. The sky turned a sickly shade of orange as the sun was blocked out by ash. For the Gorgonopsids, the end didn't come with a bang, but with a long, agonizing struggle for breath. The very features that made them successful, their high metabolism and active lifestyle, became their downfall. They needed too much food and too much oxygen in a world that could no longer provide either. This was the Great Dying, the largest mass extinction in the history of our planet. Over 90% of all species vanished forever. The era of the Gorgonopsids was wiped clean from the earth, leaving behind nothing but bones buried in the red clay. As the fires finally cooled and the ash settled, the world was a silent graveyard. But life is stubborn. In the ruins of the Permian world, a few small, burrowing synapsids survived. They were tiny, unimpressive creatures that lived in holes to escape the heat. These survivors were our direct ancestors. They watched as the world reset itself. With the great predators gone, a new power vacuum was created. The earth was empty, and nature hates a vacuum. Slowly, a different group of animals began to rise. They were lighter, faster, and could survive on much less. They were the early archosaurs, the ancestors of the dinosaurs. For the next 150 million years, these new rulers would dominate the planet, pushing our ancestors into the shadows of the night. We often look at the dinosaurs as the pinnacle of prehistoric life, but they were actually the second act. The Gorgonopsids and their kin had already built a global empire and lost it long before the first Brachiosaurus ever took a step. When you look at a dog, a cat, or even into the mirror, you are looking at the legacy of that lost world. We carry the teeth of the Gorgonopsids and the resilience of the Lystrasaurus. We are the children of the survivors of the Great Dying. The story of life before the dinosaurs isn't just a story about monsters. It's our origin story. It's a reminder that no matter how powerful a ruler might seem, the earth is the ultimate master, and the only constant is change. The Gorgonopsids ruled for millions of years, confident in their power, never knowing that the very ground they walked on was about to betray them. They are a haunting shadow from a time when the world was young, violent, and full of wonders we are only just beginning to understand.